Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Glenna.
Morning.
Good morning, Glenn. Can you hear me?
Good morning.
Are you all?
Morning, everyone.
Morning, Tim.
Hey, morning, Tim.
Morning, Mark.
You're muted, Neville.
I'm here.
Yep.
Glenna,
Yes.
I couldn't get in yesterday. My iPad was beyond my reach and there was nobody home.
Oh, okay. Well, glad to see you today.
Okay, I just can't, you don't see me, right?
No.
No, I don't.
Okay,
There you
all
are.
right,
You are?
there I
Hey,
am.
Renee.
Morning.
Okay.
It looks as if we're still missing Jack Gardner, John Trudell, and Dawn.
Jack Gardner's logging on now. Won't let me rename. Mute.
We got you, Judy.
Yeah,
Hi, how are you? I'm trying to rename him. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Trying to get my name off and put his name on. Oh, here it is. I got it.
In politics, you get a lot of names.
Yeah.
some of them you don't like.
All right.
How you doing, Tim?
All right, Neville.
You
Yeah,
looking
good to see
man.
you.
Nice to see you.
Okay. It is 9:01 and we do have a quorum. So I will call to order the special meeting of the Community Preservation Committee being held for hearings on 4 of the applications that are before us for consideration. This is being held by Zoom as a result of the being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless it's required by law, and is not required by law. So this will not feature public comment. This is being videotaped and recorded, so please remember that anything that you say or show on the screen will be seen by others. The first item on the agenda today is the application of Renee Seeley and the Nantucket Housing Authority with respect to the building envelope preservation for 2 and 6 Maya Comet Road. Renee, you have been here before us, but you know the way that we work is that we give you about 15 minutes to do a presentation with respect to fleshing out the materials that you provided for us, and then be willing to and able to respond to questions from the committee members for the next 15 minutes or so, or however long it takes in order to be able to satisfy the concerns or questions of the committee. And so I would like to welcome you and your team, and would ask you to start your presentation.
Great. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure being here. And the last time the Housing Authority applied for preservation funds was in the year 2019. We received 2 prior awards from you in 2018, 2019 to preserve the structural integrity of our inventory of housing here that was originally built in 1988. So as I mentioned 4 years ago too, the Department of Housing and Community Development has strongly encouraged housing authorities to come before their local CPCs and apply for community preservation funds to do just that, to, you know, to preserve the building envelopes and to protect the housing structures from future harm, injury, and destruction. So
Just to interject one thing, for those new members to the CPC, the three words that Renee just mentioned are absolutely critical. And it is on the basis of that need that with respect to this application, we are able to proceed because of the fact that these structures, while important to affordable housing, were in fact not originally funded by the CPC. And in work we did with the coalition and with Renee's help 2 years ago, we were able to obtain an opinion that by making the determination, which we will have to make, that this funding is necessary to deal with, to avoid future injury, harm, or destruction to the structure, is the basis on which any award can be made relative to the funding requests. I proceed. It's really important, Renee, and I just wanted to make sure everybody understands how this application can go forward if we look forward to funding it. Thank you.
yes, and thank you for hearing those three words because they are important. So we have successfully this year completed preserving the building envelope for buildings 1 and 6 My Comet Road. And for those of you who haven't taken a drive down My Comet Road, please do, because they look fantastic. And I have the CPC to thank for that. The application, you know, what they consist of is just completely redoing the building envelopes. That includes the roof, the sidewalls, trim was just completely rotted. I mean, things were leaking. So it's been a real shot in the arm, which we're all hearing a lot of lately during this pandemic. So it's a shot in the arm that the Housing Authority needed. And not only have a wonderful look at, the tenants feel proud and happy to also get to see these buildings preserved in the state that they, and change from the state that they were into what they are now. So we've completed, so that was paid for with CPC funds, with also assistance from the state called a HILAP application, because we were a little short on our original construction estimate. So the state was able to come in and help match certain funds so we could get those buildings done. The first one that you funded, building number 3, building 4 My Comet Road, that had to go out to bid 3 times. And the pandemic hasn't helped through all of this too, getting off island contractors because they have to be DCAM certified and bonded, which no one here on Nantucket, no contractors have those criteria. So, but that work's going to start this fall on that building. So you will see 3 of the buildings. How many are we? 1, 2, 3 of the buildings done on My Comet Road. So now we're moving up to Benjamin Drive. So buildings 1 and 3 Benjamin Drive, which are highly visible too from My Comet Road, do have new roofs that were funded by the state. But we do need to do the sidewalls and the trim, and in some cases, windows and doors as well. 2 of the apartments have also brand new windows. So we're not asking for as much, but we're also unable to get any kind of matching assistance this time from the state because we've used it all up. We don't have any funding available to us probably until 2025. And these buildings need attention now, again, to protect them from any future injury, harm, and destruction. So that's pretty much it. I mean, it's kind of a repeat of what we've done in the past, and it's really, really, you know, necessary that we get these buildings, you know, preserved so that we can maintain our housing inventory here. They're 33-year-old structures and they need some attention. And so we're back before you to ask for some help. That's it. Trying to lower my phone here.
Okay. Questions from the commissioners? Tim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Nantucket Housing Authority. I'm not available to take your call.
I don't have a question, but I fully support this effort. Renee, I don't know if we were the first CPC to give money, found this way to be able to move money to your organization or not, but the, Renee has this collection of houses in our community, and really the state gives her very little support or no support to keep them up. So I'm glad there's a way for us to participate in getting the money over to you in some small way.
All right.
Thank
There are 234 housing authorities in the state of Massachusetts, so that's our competition. I'm sure we're not the first to, I doubt very much we're the first to have applied for CPA funds, but again, it was a memo that was sent out to all the local housing authorities in the state, encouraging us to do just that and to apply for our CPA funds.
Are there other questions
one-
or comments?
Just one, Mr. Chair.
John.
Renee, just you in red throughout the plan, you had said soft costs for designers and advertising for 44,772 for 3 Benjamin Drive. And also soft costs for 1 Benjamin Drive of 44,040. If we're looking at just doing the exterior building envelopes, roof, shingles, trim, and sidewall, what are the soft costs used for designer and advertising of that?
Well, it drives me crazy too, John.
Okay.
But because we have to put the project out to bed, we are required to hire what they call a house doctor, which is nothing different than an architect, who are all pre-approved by the state. And they literally have to redraw these plans and include them in the bid packets. And that's just the misfortune of being a public entity, because we're required to go through all of these motions like they were new structures.
Wow.
And it's also a formula too, which we're part of a regional capital improvement team, and the housing authority from Taunton is what we call our RCAT team. And there's a whole formula, and they prepared this capital planning system. So when you reach a certain threshold over $100,000, it just kicks in a certain number. Now, hopefully we won't have to spend that much, but there will be design fees, hopefully for half that, but I can't say for sure, but it's a requirement that it's unavoidable. The fact that we're a public entity, and it drives us crazy, yes.
Yeah, no, I can see, because I just see that there's 88,000, almost $90,000 for design and costs.
Buildings that exist, I know.
Yeah, and that could be that could fund pretty much an entire project or one of the houses for the building envelopes. If
I was allowed to
designing it,
Exactly. If I was allowed to GC the job myself, I could probably get these buildings done for that price, but I can't.
That is frustrating. I'm sorry your hands are tied. That's just.
Yeah, the town of Nantucket is fully aware of that, because they're subject to the same bidding regs, and it's what we have to do. And
Okay.
maybe someday there'll be a reform bill to exempt certain types of projects like this, where you don't.
At least ones that are already in existence, because they're not redesigning it.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
just-
they are speccing, and I do appreciate the assistance from an architect that is speccing. For example, I sent you some photography, I think, of the new roofs that went up.
Yes.
And they are using really all new high-tech systems that I was extremely happy about. So they're better ventilated than what we had in the past. And we have the architect to thank to keeping us up to date as to the level of improvements that we undertake. So they are definitely do something, but 44,000, let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Especially too, where the architect's probably going to be the same one, because that's the one that the state will select for this region. And because they've kind of gone through the motions and have those specs in place, that we can, say, come on now, don't double dip.
Thank you.
Renee, what happens to the tenants during this process?
Because it's all exterior work, they just are fine in their homes. The only time that they're going to be a little inconvenienced is when the only interior work that has to happen is when we pop out the old windows and retrofit these new windows in.
Well, what about the studs and stuff like that that you found in the other ones that were really rotted and stuff like that? How does
There was no sidewall. The sidewall shingles is all that happened in doing new. So they're not, the interior of the buildings are not disrupted whatsoever.
Oh, okay.
And the great news is when we were doing the roof and sidewalls, there was no rot on the side, the plywood. The help me out here. What do we call
Sheathing.
Sheathing, thank you. So yeah, so that was the good news. So literally the work that took place was exterior asphalt shingles, exterior cedar shingles, and the trim. The HCC allowed us to use that PVC product now. So we hope too that they never have to be painted in the future. So we're looking at the improvements that we've done will certainly outlive our lifetimes.
Does this have an effect on the rent that you have to or can charge with respect to that?
No,
we're under state statute.
Yeah. So 30% of their gross monthly income is their rent, regardless. So it's all based on their income, their rent. It has nothing to do with the quality of housing that we provide for them.
May I make a statement, Ken?
Go ahead, Diane.
I spend a lot of time every day going into all three streets of this building. And I think one of the important things that Renee said was that the pride that the people had in their houses, because I think this is one of the things that we're reaching with other low-cost housing. This is the best one. The houses are nice. They've been well taken care of. They are fitting into the system, and Renee and their team have spent a great deal of time keeping them that way, planting trees and everything. So any work or monies that go into this is a plus for not only them, but for us as a town. So I've gone over the sheets, and I would highly recommend that we approve this request.
We're just at the hearing stage right now, but I appreciate your comment.
I just wanted to add to that a lot of whatever state money becomes available to us in the future, I really need to focus on the interior of these apartments. Getting into, again, the quality of housing we provide for our tenants is very important. And the kitchens are 33 years old too. So the flooring is 33 years old and terrible. So, and that's going to be a huge undertaking, because you got to do it while people are living in there too. So we'll figure out a system. It's been done before, and I've been doing it through our federal program. Easy enough, but there's such great new flooring products and things. I can't wait to start that, but
Renee,
I'm off topic here, sorry.
Yeah. Renee, what you might want to do is, through your housing authorities across the state, in view of the statement that they've come out and said that they should apply to the CPC for funding, they perhaps should get together with the CPC coalition and suggest some language that is clear that houses which have in fact been created by the housing authority can get the similar treatment under the CPC as those which have been created by CPC funds themselves, because the principle is the same, in the sense that you have a government entity that is funding affordable housing and therefore should be able to look after it and maintain it. The existing CPC Act does allow that for structures that have in fact been created with funding from the CPC, but it is currently drafted exclusionary, except with the language that we've been able to come up with relative to preserving the whatever those words were again. So you should attempt to get an amendment to the CPA Act or their guidelines with respect to that that housing that has been created with funding from housing authorities can receive the same treatment with respect to restoration and as those created with CPC funds in the first place.
I think it's a great suggestion, and I'm going to mention it to, my program reps, but DHCD is like that big tanker that's really hard to stop sometimes or start. So but it's a great suggestion so that we don't have to play word games.
Yeah.
Because, our affordable housing and what was originally built, as far back for us as 88, but a lot of it was like in the 60s. And we do need to preserve this inventory because the likelihood, well, no one's building any new public housing and haven't for many, many years. So it really does fall into our need to, again, protect them from any future destruction.
Are there any other questions or comments for Renee relative to this particular application?
I have a couple of comments.
Linda.
Being a housing authority member, a long-time housing authority member. I think I'm the longest one on there left. We appreciate the funding from CPC, and just a couple of things, just to elaborate on what's Renee said. We do have two different sections. We have a state section and we have a federal section. Each one is under their own requirements and statutes from the two different entities. So one may be easier for us to rehab and the other one is not. The state is notoriously bad about helping. And the reason why our costs are so high, in addition to the fact that it has to go out to the RFP, we have to do prevailing wage. And whoever responds, which is usually, as Renee said, we've had to advertise multiple times, has to be bonded and accepted by the state. So we're spending more than we would be if I went out and hired my contractor to shingle the roof or shingle the siding, because they're not prevailing wage, but they're not bonded by the state. There was only one entity here bonded, and he actually was the higher bid on something. So it just, there's a lot of complications to doing anything at the housing authority. So we greatly appreciate all the money we've gotten so far, and the units do look much better. And it does make people take more pride in where they live and take care of what they do. We have some people in there who love to plant stuff. We are doing planting now of certain things, and it's just, we try. I mean, it's 85, I think, was the first group. And so we just keep moving along.
We have one maintenance man. That's all we're allowed.
One maintenance guy. That's it. And we have, he's restricted in how much he can be paid. Renee is restricted on both sides. The federal pays one and the state pays one, and she's restricted on both sides of that as well. So though we'd love to have a lot more help and get things done quicker and cheaper, because we're under those restrictions, we can't.
Thank you, Linda. Are there any other questions or comments from any of the other commissioners? Hearing none, then Renee, I want to thank you very much. I don't think that I did not hear that we needed any additional information from you prior to our consideration of your request. So on behalf of the committee, I wanted to thank you for a very thorough and good presentation. Thank you for the work that you've done before, and wish you success in your negotiations with the contractors. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Glenna, do you want to let in our next applicant, which is
Yes, Janice and Terry Ann Vigil.
okay.
Hi, Janice. Hi, Terry Ann.
Hi.
Good morning, Janice.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Yeah, and you have obviously been here before, so you know the drill. You have up to 15 minutes to sort of flush out your application, sort of bring us up to speed on on the dire situation that we continue to face as a result of the pandemic and the nature of your request for this year. So proceed, please.
Okay. My name is Janice Carrero. I'm the Executive Director for Nantucket Food, Fuel, and Rental Assistance, which is a program of the Interfaith Council. I believe Terry Ann Vigil, who is our treasurer, is also on the Zoom call.
She is.
Okay, I'm looking at the screen and I think maybe everyone has heard about this program in the past, maybe.
Well, you have two
Exception of
commissioners.
Mark
You have
Beal.
one new commissioner to
Okay,
Mark.
and Neville, who is also.
Neville
new,
has
but
been
knows
here
the
before.
He knows the program very well. Well, first of all, we want to thank you very much for your current year spending. I can only say we feel it is going to be fully used. We have no idea what the effects of COVID are going to continue, but if the last couple of months are any predictor, we are still helping families who have been affected by COVID in one way or the other. So we think this year is still going to see the effects of COVID. So thank you for your current year's spending. I think just for the sake of Mr. Beal, the program provides, I'll just give you a very brief overview. The program provides rental assistance to lower income island residents who may be facing a financial crisis of one nature or another and may need some short-term help with their rent. We either pay all of their rent for a month or two while they're maybe recovering from illness or surgery or COVID. We may pay a piece of their rent, and they pay a piece of their rent during periods when their employment is reduced for a variety of reasons. In many instances, the seasonal economy that we have. And we also help folks move into housing either because they are currently in a overcrowded situation or where they're living doesn't meet safety and health standards. And many times in the recent past, due to our current real estate nature, because their houses are suddenly sold and they have to move out. So we will help with first and last to get them moved. The subsidy is, again, short-term, and it is paid directly to the landlord. It is not paid to the tenant, nor is it paid to another tenant who may be subletting. We want the landlord to be fully aware of who the people are in the houses that they're renting. So the payment goes directly to them. And the housing must meet safety and health standards. So that's the program in a nutshell. It's been around since 2007. We've received assistance from the Community Preservation Committee for many years. And without that help, we could not in any way, shape, or form help the number of people that we do, because the CPC has in the past, maybe with the exception of last year, been the predominant funder of the program. The monies given to us by the CPC are used to pay those rents, and a small amount is used to pay the production costs to interview people, talk to the landlords, and get the checks paid. Last year, I think we asked for 200,000, and nobody knew what COVID was going to do. But fortunately, we were able to get a one-time significant subsidy from the state through the Community Foundation, and also significant donations, which enabled us last year to help 218 residents with a whopping $608,000. I mean, that it just blew our minds, but the need was so significant. We dealt with so many folks who either had COVID and were isolated for 10 days or more, folks who were exposed to COVID and had to be quarantined, particularly in multiple family households, where one person would get it and everyone would be quarantined. Then somebody else would get it and everyone was quarantined again. And then we dealt with folks who had to deal with the byproduct of COVID. Many families where one working member had to stay home because the schools were all remote learning and they couldn't leave a 5-year-old child alone. And other folks whose jobs were affected by either being shut down for periods of time or having reduced hours. So we're entering this new year, and more importantly to you, this year coming in July, with a little bit of unpredictability. No one, unless you have a crystal ball, no one knows what the effects of how long the effects of COVID or the COVID economy are going to affect the island. I certainly don't. So we're planning for a little bit of an increase, but we're also planning for this year for rental assistance at about $394,000 with our current CPC funding. And if all goes well and the economy bounces, we're thinking 2023 will probably be in that same amount. So I hope the days of the 218 clients and the 600,000 are gone, but I mean, your guess is as good as mine. So that is why we've asked for a slight increase. The more people who are exposed to us, the more people who are going to be aware that there is a source of assistance when they need it. There are always going to be people who get sick or injured unexpectedly. There are always going to be people who are going to have to move because their houses are being sold or for some other reason. And there are always going to be some folks whose income is insufficient to meet the current economy and the cost of rents. And that's why we're here, in a nutshell.
Terry? Would you like to add something?
Oh, I would just like, did you say, ask me? I would just like to reinforce from the board standpoint how hard Janice has worked and how grateful we are for these funds that we have had. It's been an extraordinary time. There have been a huge number of individuals and families helped, and we just are very grateful for all your support.
I have a question for Janice, just a point of clarification. Janice, last year you did request 200,000, but in fact we allocated 275,000 to you last year.
I think it's 250, Ken.
Was it 250? And
Yes,
so your request this year is simply $25,000 above the amount that we actually awarded last year. Is that correct?
That is correct. I'm never, this is an environment that's just totally unpredictable to us. So, I'm looking back at our history and what we did in quote unquote normal times. Of course, rents are higher. And the number of people on the island is growing. So that's the factor I'm putting in. But beyond that, we need more funding. We'll go out and seek it. But I think a 275 base is a great place to feel secure to start.
Okay. Questions from other commissioners, committee members as to Janice and Terry Ann as to this particular request?
And yes, Mr. Chair, if I may. Janice, just a question for the process. How do we go about letting other people know that own maybe a garage apartments or something like that, where they rent it out for a couple weeks out of the year to have tax-free 2-week rental? And this extra $500 a month, $6,000 max per year might be the difference to persuade them to rent out their 1 or 2 bedroom garage to make up that difference of $6,000. So we might get a few more year round. So I'm not sure, does the tenant find a place and then apply to you? Or is there advertising that goes out to the general public that own maybe these small second tertiary dwellings or something like that, that they realize they don't have to rent out short term? If they get subsidized, they could rent it out year round.
Well, the tenant usually comes to us having found someplace. However, we may help that tenant try to find something through our connections. The grapevine, the word of mouth on the island is pretty strong. Occasionally landlords will call me and say, I just want you to know I have this apartment that I'm going to be renting, if we have a tenant at that moment that we can make that switch to, then we will. Other than that, we work closely with the housing community to get that word out. I mean, just yesterday, the housing stakeholders met, and every housing entity on the island is a part of that. We share information when we do a fundraising campaign, when we go to donors, when we talk to the Interfaith Council and all of the churches. We're always emphasizing year-round housing for year-round. But for us to go to find it is a whole other component that we're not staffed to do.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Question,
Linda?
David, I think of all the programs that we get involved with through CPC, it seems like we get the biggest bang for our buck out of this one program. So it has really, really stepped in the last 2 years almost. Hard to believe it's been almost 2 years or over 18 months since we've been in this pandemic.
Not if you work it every day.
Yeah, and Janice does a great job. So I just want to give them props for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Mr. Beal is looking. Ken?
Oh, sorry, Mark, I didn't see you here.
Yes, good morning. Does in your grants on your application is CFN, the Community Foundation of Nantucket? That's what I want to know. Thank you. That's a great program.
Yes.
I know it through our church of St. Paul's, and Reverend Max is our minister. And he's doing.
And during the pandemic, obviously, it's really difficult to predict a year or two in advance that some kind of crisis is going to come up and you're going to need X amount more money. But through their emergency relief fund and through their now very solid relationship with the state is now funding many of their grants through the community foundations. If we find ourselves in a great need, we're able to go to them under their emergency programs and get funding, because there was no way we were going to be able to help 218 households without some additional funding that we needed right on the spot without them.
Other issues, questions? Neville?
Just wanted to say thank you, Janice, for the good job that you've been doing all these years. Also, you have to keep in mind the title of this program is the Nantucket Food, Fuel, and Rental Assistance Program. And for unfortunate or fortunate reason, we've seen it grow, the need for it grow a lot on Nantucket. So I think this is a very important program, and I think you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. That we're going to see, not that it affects this particular grant or the rental program, but there's going to be a significant push this year to increase food insecurity on to deal with food insecurity on the island. So that's another piece of something that we do. And we also now have, and I have a staff person to help with that. We now have a medical travel, a small medical through the hospital CHIP funding to help folks get off island if they need medical treatment. And, you know, many of these people, whether it be fuel, whether it be rent, whether it be medical treatment and food, they tend to be, once you're in a bind, you tend to need everything.
Mhm. Yep.
Mark?
Yeah, just to follow up. So what we're seeing in the rental assistance is not the Interfaith Council's budget. It's just a rental assistance budget. Is that right?
Correct. It's just for this program.
Thank you.
And Janice, just to be clear, based on the discussions we had over the years, virtually all of this money goes to rental assistance because you've been able to arrange funding for administration from different sources. And Mark, that was a very important consideration for the committee, that this funding does actually go to the rental assistance as opposed to administration.
Right. I mean, you do fund a small amount of the actual production work, but
Yes, you do.
administrative stuff is not touched by this grant.
Yeah.
Could I ask?
Diane? Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Janice, I just wondered, in your title thing, you had food. Is that backing buying food or going to the food pantry or what?
All of our food distribution goes through the food pantry
It goes to the food pantry.
Right.
Because
program.
I just feel that it would be great if more people could contribute, knows about contributing or how to contribute. Because I feel that with what we have seen already, the price of food is not going to drop this winter. The price of food is going to go up. And without the take it or leave it, people have to buy winter clothes. It's going to be a very tight winter as far as a lot of people are concerned, and they might have not considered themselves in trouble last year, but I think we're going to see more problems this year. Do you think so?
Well, not that it affects this grant, but we will be knock on wood, with Mr. Beal's help, we will be receiving a significant funding increase from the community foundation, from the state through the community foundation to increase the amount of food we distribute.
Have available.
Yeah, a part of our problem is we are trying to figure out how we can do it in the tiny space we're in. We really need to move. So that's another problem that looms on that program side. So, but there will be, the goal is to increase the amount of food that is distributed to those who are facing hunger on the island.
Well, I think you've done a wonderful program, and I've learned a lot more about it.
Are there any other questions or comments from any of the committee members relative to this particular application? Seeing or hearing none, Janice, I would want to thank you and Terry Ann for coming this morning. As I think you've heard from the committee, we understand the need and we truly appreciate what you and your group have done in terms of addressing a problem that people from the outside don't really seem to understand exists here just as it does exist in any other community. And for them, it's hard to understand how it can exist in a community that's perceived to be as wealthy as this is, but we are sort of like the normal rest of the world communities in the sense that we have real people who live here who have struggles, and what you're doing is helping to address those. So we appreciate that, and we thank you for your presentation. And I did not see or hear any issues that needed to have further input from you before we go into our deliberations. Is that correct, committee?
Right.
Okay, then.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for coming, and continue with your really outstanding work.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Glenna, can you see if Mr. Williams is available?
Yes, I'm letting him in now.
Can you give the the people at the Affordable Housing Trust Fund an indication that we may be early?
Sure,
All right, thank you.
you're welcome.
For the record, I am an outlaw with Clifford. He is my ex-brother-in-law.
Noted.
Good morning, Clifford. We can't see you. Clifford,
Yes.
we can't see you.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay. Let me mess with this thing. Participant.
No, go down to the bottom and
start
start
video.
video. Hit video.
Now,
Yes,
there you go.
Okay, Clifford, welcome. This is the hearing of the Community Preservation Committee, and the process that we go through is we allow you to take up to 15 minutes to expand on the request that you've made, outline it, and then be open to questions from the committee members relative to your presentation. So feel free to start and expand and help explain to us your presentation. And then we will open the floor to committee members relative to their questions.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank the CPC for allowing me to submit this application. I know the CPC can't give money to someone who's not a nonprofit. So I've been dealing with Tucker Holland and Andrew Vorse, and basically I'm trying to get this money in order to develop Clay Street, which I just bought only months ago. It was originally part of the Richmond group. Clay Street goes up, and initially it was supposed to be a road that went all the way through into the Richmond group. So I was looking to develop the property and like I said, along with Tucker, to provide affordable housing to meet the SHI list requirements, hopefully at 80% or higher. I know you guys were part of that with the Sachem Path. So basically, I'm trying to take this money to develop the road. It's an ongoing plan. We just started it. So and unfortunately, like everything else we do in the town of Nantucket, we have to do it a year in advance before we can figure out exactly how much we're going to spend or how much it's going to cost. So I've given an estimate of about $950,000 to put in the water and the sewer, the roads, development, planning. I'd have to go to town meeting, obviously, in April, and get the zoning changed, get the sewer district changed. But I wanted to park the money with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and earmark it for the Clay Street project and see if we could be more flexible. I think that's the reason we have the trust, is to allow the development of these programs with a public-private partnership. And that's pretty much where we are. It's like if you've seen the book I submitted, the request I submitted, it's pretty small. I don't have a tax return. The LLC is brand new, but hopefully sooner than later, maybe even before December, we can have a pretty solid plan of what we're going to do with the cooperation of the Affordable Housing Trust and the planning department. So that's where I stand.
Clifford, I'll sort of make a comment first. I think your application is really way too premature for us to consider. I've spoken to the Stuart Saginaw at the coalition up in Boston with respect to it, and they indicate that there have been some circumstances where a developer has been able to get some funding with respect to creating a portion of housing for affordable housing, but only as a result of a complete plan with respect to how that will occur, and the nature of the benefit to the town, and the financial stability and capability of the developer in terms of being able to move forward and continue and develop the entire project, looking for reimbursement of some funds relative to the affordable housing component. And in the practice of the Community Preservation Committee for the last 21 years is that we do not advance funds in advance. We reimburse the entity that has in fact made the expenditure that complies with the terms of the approval at the town meeting and that complies with the approval of the language within the act itself. So while your idea is really a terrific one in terms of seeking to address it, based on the advice that I have from Stuart Saginaw, unfortunately, you're way premature in terms of coming to us with respect to the request, because your plan would need to show the full scope of the project, the scope of the capabilities of the developer to be able to do that, a pro forma with respect to financial pro forma with respect to how to do that, and then the timing of it and the benefit to the town, all as a part of the application that needs to be put forward. And so, I mean, I really, truly appreciate the initiative that you're taking to try and figure out a way to be able to do this. But based on the terms of the act and based on the interpretation that's occurred in all of the different several hundred communities in the state, this is not something that we would be able to consider at this particular point in time, and as it is not in a position for us to be able to act on.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's the whole idea was just developed in the last couple of months, and I wouldn't be asking for funds until I had a plan, until I put it this way, if I could get town meeting approval next spring, the next day I'd be shovel ready. I'd be moving dirt, and I think I could get something done by July, June. So I think we can form a plan probably by even November. And I know what time constraints you guys have to make your final decision, but I'd just like to be left to some sort of consideration, because I don't want to wait another year. And then it's, you know, I thought that's why the Housing Trust Fund was such a great idea, because they're more flexible versus obviously the way we operate as a municipality, where we have to talk about this now to get money next spring. If we don't talk about it now, we have to wait till next year. So no, I'm absolutely going to have all those things in place as soon as possible. And I don't know how quickly I need them, obviously, because we have to submit these articles by November. But I guess I'm just asking for a chance to produce those documents and produce a plan, like I said, with the help of the planning board and Tucker. And if we can't do that quick enough, then obviously we won't move forward. But I think we can. So I'm not sure what time you're going to give me, or is today the only day? But if it's another month or two, a month and a half to really produce
the issue is we are holding or making our decisions relative to the warrant articles in the middle of this month. And so unless you can get to us a formal plan before our hearings start on October 12th, your application in the form that it is, in fact, would be unable to be considered, because in fact, it does not contain the information that would allow us to provide a basis on which to give a grant for what it would be used for.
Right. And I'm not trying to pull a fast one. I'm just I thought that maybe we could really develop a new philosophy of expediting some of these things, not just now, but in the future, where, you know, a public-private partnership where people are going to bring in their property and allow it to be developed. Because I could just build a house and a pool and a tennis court and sell the thing and make a bunch of money and be done with it. But I just thought logistically, this piece of property is such a great location where it used to exist, part of the Richmond development. And I'm also under the impression that water is coming down the road to service Skyline in the different areas. So the whole thing's kind of coming together pretty quickly. And I was just trying to take advantage of it so we could, like I say, expedite something so that we could really have shovels in the ground next spring or the beginning of the summer, and we wouldn't have to wait another year or two.
We're not disagreeing with you. I'm just indicating to you that with respect to government, and this funding comes through the process that was created by government, we have to stick within the guidelines and the stricture of the rules that we are mandated to comply with, because we have an obligation to A, the public, and B, we have an obligation to the Department of Revenue with respect to the nature of our approvals and the expenditures and how those fit within the scope of what we're allowed to do.
Mr. Chair, if I may comment?
Yeah, John.
Yeah, Clifford, I have to agree with Ken. I think you're just a little too premature. I love the idea. I love the idea that it would be all affordable. It would meet all the shy list requirements, a significant amount. But I think it's just probably just a year or two more premature for a few reasons. Number one, we still have to go through zoning, which is a question mark if you can even get the zoning change to 5,000 square feet. Sewer and water, obviously, with the extension of that, that could take a month, it could take a year, it could take 5 years. The total that is requested for our applicants, as Linda would always say, is $9 million. So to designate even 950 or a portion is a lot of money for something that isn't necessarily in place yet. I know you're an LLC, but not a true nonprofit yet. And by going through the Affordable Housing Trust, I know Tucker is coming before us next. And by doing that, you may still be able to get this thing running through any kind of funds that they already have in place to designate towards affordable housing. So it's not, hopefully there's a possibility there, but they're actually requesting $5 million for our next. So it just seems like there are too many things. The intent is great. It looks like you're on your way. If we can, it just might be a little bit too premature. But I wish you all well, and I hope you're able to come back to us if we don't, approve anything this round for next year. But thank you.
Thank you.
Neville.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clifford, some things that I wanted to say was said, but I think this is a good idea. I think it's not too late for you to go before a town meeting. And in terms of the public private partnership, I think your best bet may be to go before the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I think that's your best bet if you can get all of those little things combed out, and go to town meeting and see if our town meeting can approve it, and then when you have everything all, see, I don't think Affordable Housing Trust Fund is as restricted as we are in terms of time constraints and all. And I think they're a good source for you, better than us actually, in terms of housing. So I think you should keep that contact with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And I think you should go forward to do the presentation at the town meeting. And if they give you the okay and you have all your ducks in a row, go before the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And I think that'll be your best bet. Thank you.
Other questions, comments from the committee?
No.
I can't see anybody yet. Glenn, is someone else raising their hand?
No, no one else is raising their hand.
Okay. Clifford, thank you for the presentation. I'm sorry that the message that I had to give was not one that you wanted to hear. But I think what you've heard from the committee is the fact that we really like your initiative. We like the approach that you're taking. We like the idea that you're working to create a private-public partnership. But unfortunately, with respect to the conditions that we have to do, you're premature in terms of the information that you've put together. For us to be able to consider an award at this particular point in time is what I believe the conclusion will be when unless we get something else from you before we convene to make our recommendations amongst ourselves for the warrant articles in the middle of this month.
All right, so that'd be the 12th. I'll try to make that happen, and if I have to go ahead and fund it myself, I'm just trying to reduce the cost so that I mean, that's the idea of this whole thing, is to make it affordable. So, I mean,
Understood.
absolutely. So I'll move forward with that and I'll be in contact with you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thanks, Bruce.
All right, Glenna, can you see whether or not we would be able to get the people from the Affordable Housing Trust online? I know we're about a half an hour earlier than we had scheduled them.
Right. I did reach out to Tucker, and based on the schedule that we provided them for 10:30, that's what they're planning for. So they're not able to join us until then.
Okay.
So we have about 20
Seriously.
minutes.
So we have a party for the next half hour?
Yes, virtual. Bring your own snacks.
I got all my Girl Scout snacks yesterday.
Okay.
Does it make sense for us to turn off and come back in 20 minutes as opposed to sitting here? Or what do you want to do? Or maybe we just, maybe just stop the video on all of the positions.
It'll be a 501c3. Do we see any of them yet?
Yeah, yep, I'm seeing three of them so far.
Good morning.
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 Good morning.
Morning.
Four of them.
Okay, we should go then.
Okay, is it Tucker or Brian that are going to start? You guys understand, you know the procedure. We give you 15, 20 minutes max to in fact go through the details of your proposal, and then you open it up to answer questions that we have with respect to that. So proceed, please.
Great, thank you, Ken. I'm just going to open the meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust. Within your meeting, as a preliminary matter, Brian Sullivan, the Affordable Housing Trust. Confirm all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are here. Brooke Moore.
Yes.
Dave Iverson.
Yes.
That's all I see on at the moment. Staff, Tucker Holland.
Yes.
We have one anticipated speaker, Ann Kuspa. Ann, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Great. And this is Brian Sullivan. I'm going to waive the remote meeting introduction, as you have already read that, I assume, Ken?
Yes, yep.
So with that, we'll open our meeting, and I will turn to Tucker to start the beginning of the presentation. I believe you're going to start with the spreadsheet, Tucker?
That's correct. Yes. Thank you very much, Brian. And thank you very much to the CPC members. We are pleased to be here today with our request for funding for FY23. The significant financial support that you all have given to housing through the trust in recent years has made just a tremendous difference in our ability to move forward and in relatively short order, bring on some significant additional housing for our year-round community. So I think that the heart of our application really is the financial spreadsheet. So if I could, I'm going to just screen share here to go through both the sources and uses, and we have a little bit of additional detail I thought it may be useful to go through with respect to both Habitat for Humanity and Housing Nantucket. And we do have both Jerry Keneally from Habitat for Humanity and Ann Kuspa from Housing Nantucket with us today. So I will attempt to do the screen share. Can everybody see that? Again, this was contained in your application packet. I will note, I think one line item here had a mislabel in terms of the name in the left-hand column. I think where the cursor is now where it says Articles 8 and 10 had a copy and paste with a different designation. The numbers didn't change in the table, but I just wanted to point out that I've made that adjustment in what we're looking at here. But as you can tell, we are very conscious of the sources of funding we have for the different programs that we implement, and each of those sources has very specific requirements. You all are very familiar with the CPC requirements, and so this is simply to illustrate that we keep a close eye on where the money is coming from and how we're using it, and making sure that we are doing so in accordance with the requirements of each of these funding sources. You can see in 2019, you all had provided the original $5 million bonding, and we have highlighted further below what we are seeking for FY23. And you'll see in a moment why, as we really will have deployed all of the capital, both from the $5 million bonding as well as the annual appropriations to date. And if not technically out the door today, you know, it has been committed and will be out the door in very short order. As you can see as well, the CPC isn't the only source of funding for what we do. The town has, the voters have stepped up in a very significant way and supported nearly $40 million worth of funding over the course of the last few years. And again, we are very appreciative to the voters for that. So I'm going to go over to the uses page, and, you know, in particular, you know, focused in on the requirements of the CPC money. I want to say upfront that the CPC funds have been just vital in our ability to work to create more year-round housing, and at the same time manage our subsidized housing inventory and safe harbor. I think everyone's probably aware that we are now in our third consecutive year of safe harbor, and that is in no small part due to the strong support that you all have given. You can see, if we're looking at some of the projects further down the list under programs, that you'll see that we are using the CPC funds from the prior bonding in a manner where 25% of our acquisition price for land is coming from the CPC, and then 75% is often coming from the debt exclusion financing, which would be Neighborhood First or Article 24 from last year. And that ability to use 25% of CPC funds gives us a great deal of latitude in operating in the real estate market. It basically allows us to go direct and operate in a similar manner to the land bank, so not have to RFP and receive responses to that, but we can really act quickly to take advantage of certain market opportunities. And 135, 137 Orange Street would be a great example of that, as well as the UMass property acquisition over on Vesper Lane, as well as the 31 Fairgrounds collaboration that we're doing with Housing Nantucket and a local developer to create 22 units of housing there. So the seeds that the CPC has planted, you know, with the funding provided to date is ultimately going to be generating, you know, well in excess of 75 units of housing for our year-round community. You can see here that at the bottom of the chart, this does presume or assume that your support will be there again for the bonding request. And it's not as though we have a lot of unplanned funds available at the end of this request. Couple of things maybe to point out here. There are some unnamed opportunities listed here, the companion property relative to UMass, the ownership opportunity, where those are have been approved in executive session by the Affordable Housing Trust and soon will be before the select board. So there are many things in motion, and we are again hoping for your support here. I think it may make sense in the interest of time to go over to some further detail around the Habitat and Housing Nantucket upcoming or previous and current and upcoming projects. As you know, Habitat, Housing Nantucket, and the Affordable Housing Trust have been working in close cooperation ever since you all really introduced this central funding approach to things. And therefore, you know, when we're doing our planning, we are in regular contact with both of those organizations to make sure that the funding is available for everything that is planned for in the foreseeable future. There are many things in Nantucket that are out of our control. You know, we can't control whether a neighbor appeals a project. You know, we can't control the timing of certain regulatory approvals. One thing in Nantucket that we probably can do is ensure that the money is there when the projects are ready to go. So that is very much on our mind, and just briefly walking you through how the funds that you all have provided through the Affordable Housing Trust, again, have been utilized or are planned to be utilized through both Habitat and Housing Nantucket. You can see here it is principally through several projects. So we have listed here at the top of the Habitat list 3 Waite Drive, which is a project, you know, was supported by the CPC, is not drawing on any of the funds from the Affordable Housing Trust, but we list it here as it is part of the lead up for Habitat to get to all of their units to be eligible for inclusion on the SHI list going forward. 3 Beachgrass Road is a project supported with CPC funds through the Affordable Housing Trust. And this project was pivotal to getting to the point of all Habitat units counting on the SHI list. So this project is near the end of completion. You can see the funding that has been supplied to this project here, and this all ties to the master spreadsheet that we were looking at earlier. 375,000 went toward the land acquisition that was needed to clear the pipeline, if you will, for them. 460,000 originally in construction cost. And we all know construction costs have increased through the course of the past few years, and an additional supplement of 85,000 was approved, and that project will be coming online very shortly. Similarly, Benjamin Drive, this is a project that we're so pleased is the first 3 units of Habitat homes to count on the SHI list. And you can see here the total funding that is projected for this. There was no land cost, but for the 3 units, it's averaging roughly 430,000 a unit. And they had some money on hand that they could contribute toward this, and the balance of the funding would come through the Affordable Housing Trust. So knowing that this funding cycle for Habitat, excuse me, for the CPC, you know, is intended to carry the housing effort through July 1st of 2023, you know, Habitat is going to be through their Benjamin Drive project, if everything goes according to plan, and ready to begin their next project, which we've listed here as 5-Way Drive. I think that there, you know, is optimism that the select board may award, you know, a lot to them. They originally had come to the select board for a lot, and the select board said, well, it's got to count on the SHI list. So they've now done the work, and that is what is happening with all of their homes going forward. So the numbers here again tie back to the master spreadsheet that you saw in terms of Habitat's uses. Housing Nantucket, similarly, they all of their units are SHI eligible under their rental program. The trust has previously contributed to or planned to contribute to a number of important projects. 18 Tacoma, that is a project that has been completed. The trust was able to provide basically 2/3 of the financing for that, again, through dollars provided by the CPC. 46 Orkawa is an exciting project where a very well-conditioned existing home was able to be moved to this site. And this is also an illustration of how the system that the CPC has set up with the current funding approach is beneficial. You can see that there are monies that can be used toward this project, $95,000, which is terrific, but those monies have probably been sitting there, if you will, on the sidelines for quite a while. And because the prior system had been to allocate to specific projects, if a specific project encountered some kind of challenge through no fault of anyone's, it sidelined the money, and in this case for quite a period of time. That money could have been put to work in the interim, but we are glad that this opportunity has come along, and now it will go to very good purpose. Similarly, Housing Nantucket, you know, has planned for the ability to do additional projects on lots that it is about to finally receive from the Richmond company per a prior agreement with them. And the long story short kind of thing is, it's been a long time coming for these lots to be made available to Housing Nantucket, principally due to the land court and just the very slow process that has resulted through the COVID pandemic. But in any event, those lots are likely to be transferred finally to Housing Nantucket by the end of this year. And therefore, there is pent-up demand to get those projects going and again, more heads in beds. So we have allocated and planned for the ability for them to move forward. There, you'll notice there is a small difference between the cumulative total for Housing Nantucket here and what is on the master spreadsheet. And where that difference is this 8,000, which was minor financial support, but important for Housing Nantucket, which allowed them to get the 4 units at 7 Surfside included on the subsidized housing inventory list. So yeah, there are many ways in which your funds are tremendously benefiting the housing effort here. I guess the last thing I'll say, and then open it up to questions or comments from others who are here, but you know, we'll see that we have some planned subsidies for some of the major projects that are happening or planned to happen here. Six Fairgrounds is something that we would not, the original plan there was there would be no financial subsidy coming from the town, and that was something the developer understood and could work with. But because of the delays of the lawsuits, because of the increased construction costs that have ensued in recent years, it is likely that if we want that project to move forward, we are going to have to provide some kind of subsidy. That does not mean a grant. Those are monies that would get returned to the town over time. But that is something that we need to plan for. Similarly with Orange Street, and costs are only going up. So we believe that we have the appropriate allocation for what will ultimately be required, but it is still a little unknown, and therefore, having money available to be able to act when the opportunity is there is critical. So that would conclude what I have to say now. And if I would turn it back over to the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust for any further comment before we get into questions.
Thank you, Tucker. We just, as Tucker started, we appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you. Can I see you have Mark with his hand up for a question?
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Mark.
You're on mute, Mark.
Yep, thank you. I'm off now. I'm a new boy in town on the committee and don't understand what a $5 million bonding request means versus a grant.
Well, the bonding request would be that what we would be granting is the authorization for the town to, in fact, do a $5 million bond, and we would then be obligated to pay, according to Brian Turbot, $350,000 a year for a 15-year period to fund the cost of the bond. So the amount of money that would be allocated in our warrant this year would be $350,000 to the cost of the 15-year bond that would be approved and funded or ordered or issued by the town.
Got it. Thank you, Ken.
I have a question.
Linda.
Being as that CPC funding can only go to things that are 100% or less, is that having an impact on how you use our funds?
So if I may, Mr. Chair, we're very cognizant of that CPC limit, and therefore, for example, the land acquisitions that we're doing where we're using 25% CPC funds, we know that 25% of the resulting units will be restricted at the 100% level or less.
Okay, because I know when we did Sachem's Path, there's more than 100% median in there. And, but we funded the infrastructure, knowing that there were going to be a certain percentage. So you're adhering, whatever you're doing with our money, you're adhering to that 100% cap.
Absolutely.
Even if it's going to fund an overall infrastructure type thing, where there's going to be more than 100% of median, we can do that so long as you give us the corresponding units back.
Exactly.
Okay. I just want to make that clear because it's for the newer members.
Thank you.
Brooke.
So I'd like to follow up on that and just say, in order to have, because we're working on rental units primarily at this point, in order to have all of the units count, 25% on the subsidized housing inventory, 25% of them have to be at 80% area median income or below. And your funding basically allows us to ensure, those projects are always going to be 25% AM at 80% AMI or below. And so it's critical. And for me, the part that Tucker touched on in terms of our flexibility in entering and negotiating in the real estate purchase market and having this exception from the RFP process because we're using CPC and CPA funds has been really critical in our being able to get in the real estate game in a way that we couldn't otherwise do, because we would have to put out a request for proposals for a plot of land of a certain size and then wait for, and by the time we go through that process, the way the market's going, we're just out of the real estate game. So the availability of CPC funds is critical. And I think the other thing I wanted to say was the bonding authorization versus an annual grant is also critical to us in terms of front loading the capital we have available now to get these projects moving forward and to keep us in safe harbor over the coming years as we make our way toward our required 10%. That if we were getting a $350,000 a year grant, straight grant, we wouldn't have the financial capacity to front load these projects that we're able to do that are critical to us lining up the 24 units a year to stay in safe harbor until we get to 10%. So that's why we're pursuing this grant in this way again this year. It's really, really important. And I just wanted to emphasize that. Thanks.
Other questions or comments?
Ken?
Neville?
Yeah, I want to ask, okay, this is for a $5 million grant, a bond, and you had another one in 2019. Looking down the line, is this something you're going to come forward again next year after next? Do you think? Anyone answer?
Tucker?
Sure, that's a great question, Neville. And I'm not trying to dodge the question, but the answer is I don't know. Because one of the things that is in play here is the recent 2020 census, which is the basis for determining our subsidized housing inventory requirement. So the initial census numbers were just issued in August, and you all may have seen some of that in the state in the press in terms of our new official year-round population, and there's some housing numbers in there in terms of occupied units and non-occupied units. Those don't translate directly to what the state counts as year-round housing, and that is the determiner of our 10% requirement. But directionally, it would suggest that our requirement is going to go up. But we won't know what that number is probably until the March timeframe of in 2022. So we're on a good path right now to meet, I would say we're on an excellent path right now to meet our current 10% requirement within the next 5 years. If everything marches forward, that everything that we're currently doing marches forward as planned. But there is this new variable that our requirement may change in some material manner. And so the possibility exists that we may need additional funds. But right now, we're planning at a minimum that this is, carrying us through the next couple of years. If you all approve this, we have a lot of work to do to properly disperse these funds and produce the product. So we're in good shape for a couple of years, but it's hard for me to predict beyond that.
Ken?
Mark?
Well, I have a question sort of regarding all that. I'm not sure if it's to Tucker or to Ken, but here's my question. Looking at the 2019 $5 million bonding approval, when we look at the pile of money we have to grant this year, have you already backed out of our possible grant money for this year, money that pays for that grant?
Well, the amount of money that we have to allocate towards that grant is $350,000 in this year's warrant article. So what we would be, there would be an allocation of $350,000 toward that. And if this were approved, there would be an additional $350,000 that would be as part of our proposal relative to the approval in the warrant that goes to town meeting.
So out of our pile of money, there'll be 700,000 taken out for the Affordable Housing Trust.
That is correct. Yep.
Okay, just so I'm clear what the.
No, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And the thing is that I will have before our meeting on the 12th, I will have the amount of money that we think that we have available with respect to the different categories, because we have money that comes from the surcharge. We then have money that we can allocate in from what we expect to receive from the state. We have money that we have an interest that's earned on the money that's sitting in our unreserved and reserved accounts. And then we have money in a reserved account with respect to open space that we can allocate on top of towards that category, on top of the 10% that we are mandated to that. And we will have those numbers once I get those from the finance department.
Thank you, Ken.
Mr. Chair, just a question.
John, sorry, go ahead.
So if I'm looking at the what Mark was just saying for 350,000 for 2019 this year, and also if we approve this request for the 5 million bonding, another 350, so we're looking at 700,000 for at the annual town meeting to get approved. So each year, the more we approve, are we designating for the next 15 years instead of the grants that we've been previously approving, 400,000 and I think there was a year of 800,000. So in essence, are we committing ourselves to a minimum of $700,000 for the next 1 year, 5 years, 15 years? In replacing the grant that we would normally approve?
Well, the opportunity for them to come forward with an application for a grant is always there, but we, by having done the $5 million bonding, we have another 12 years of $350,000. And if we approve this, after this year, we will have an additional 14 years of $350,000 that are committed to the expenditure in the warrant that we recommend to the town meeting.
Yeah, and I don't have an immediate issue with that. I guess my not concern, but my thought would be for years to come now, each year we're going to be dedicating $700,000. So if we're required at 10% of our annual allotment to give to affordable housing, we know at least 700 will be directed towards that for the next 12 years. And then it's going to limit anybody else coming before us. We know where we have to start with that, with those funds. So, and I'll just use a private application like Clifford Williams presented. We'd have to really be precise in how much we're going to allot for private development, because we know we're on the hook for 700,000 for the next 12 years. And it's not an opinion, it's just clarification to make sure I'm reading this correctly.
You are reading it correctly. And Brian Turbot, could you confirm that the discussions that I had with you is that $350,000 is an appropriate number to allocate relative to in this current marketplace, the cost of an estimate of funding to pay off the bond over 15 years at $350,000?
Sure, it's still 350 is still a good number in terms of that. Now, Ken and I have also had the discussions, depending on the timing of when we permanently borrow it, we might be able to shorten that time period depending on interest rates and how we structure it. But 350 right now was calculated for 12 years for the first one, and would be the same methodology we would use if the committee were to recommend the second one. But it's still 350 is still a solid estimate for the payback.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman, of Brian?
Yes, Linda.
Brian, I know on some of these we can't pay it off early. I know we paid off one of the other ones early. Are we able to get rid of the debt early, or are we locked into the 12 or 15 years period?
Well, I mean, the way that we've been doing this is that the committee's been sending, and the way we did it with all of the borrowing so far is that when we're ready to, every year the committee's been allocating money, use Nobody as an example, or any of the other ones, Sachem's as an example, for the pay down of interest and principal. But that was been reserved on their balance sheet because we haven't permanently borrowed the money. We didn't permanently borrow it immediately. So the same thing is happening with this 5 million. So when we get to the point where we would permanently borrow the 5 million, we would take all of the accumulation of $350,000 in commitments and pay the band down and only borrow the immediate remaining part of it. We do not have the luxury of, say, paying down like a mortgage or early or what have you. These bonds, when they're sold on an amortization schedule.
Right.
There is call dates on them, but with a 12-year amortization table, it's very unlikely that we would actually be able to call it.
Well, with stockpiling the money, it's like paying it down because
It's
you're
like
paying a
paying
lump
it
sum
down,
of it
absolutely.
right off the bat. You're cutting it in
Correct.
half type of thing.
Yep.
Okay. That would really.
I mean, in
shorten
theory,
the
I
amount
could,
to pay.
in theory, we have the ability, and this is something we could take an even more in-depth look at. In theory, we could just bonds can be rolled for up to 10 years, or bands, excuse me, bond anticipation notes, which we take out all the time to finance debt in the short term before we permanently borrow it, can be rolled for up to a period of 10 years. So conceptually, if we rolled it for 10 years, you would pay down almost all of it at once, but only have a little bit left to pay down, depending on the time.
That's just what I wanted to clarify. We can't look at this 700 for 12 years when actually it may end up being less because we put in more, or less every year because we put in more.
Well, you're still going to end up paying for 12 years, regardless. I mean, it just most likely, because that's the way this has been calculated. But I think that the 350 is a good number, and the first 5 million we haven't permanently borrowed yet, so we're accumulating money which will pay down, and then we'll permanently borrow the remaining at some point in the future, most likely within the next 12 to 18 months, depending on where interest rates end up.
Neville?
If we funded this program, this 5 million, I mean, that would give us how many bonds we've had so far? We have Sachem's, we have Sachem's.
Sachem's has been paid off, and Nobody has been paid off.
And
the only bond that we have outstanding right now is a $5 million bond that we authorized 2 years ago.
Okay.
Well, let me make one point of clarification to that. You've appropriated the money which has been reserved for those bonds.
Yeah.
That money is being used to pay down the remaining piece. You did that at last year's town meeting.
Yeah, correct.
We have not actually paid off the bonds in their entirety because they're on a schedule that we can't prepay, but they have been allocated and accounting for. So you're not accounting for them in your budget anymore moving forward.
Thank you. Any other questions of Brian? And any other questions of Tucker and the other Brian relative to their request, which is been explained in terms of where it is intended to go, and with an understanding of that we're committing the dollars that we're committing this year is $350,000 in our warrant article.
Brooke had her hand up, Ken.
Sorry, Brooke. Thank you, Mark. I can't see everybody on here.
I will defer to Tim, who also has his hand up as a CPC member.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
If that's okay.
Yes, Tim. Yep. Tim.
Well, I'm in a quandary now because ladies always go first. But Brooke, thank you. I will ask a question, and that is of Brian. If we're holding the money, if you will, to pay off the bonds, if the CPC is approved, as you said, and you're holding the money because they're on a schedule and can't be prepaid, what is the advantage of doing that versus letting the CPC hold our money and use it for other projects? If we're just going to pay it down at the rate of $350 per year anyways, why is it better for you to hold the money as opposed to us to use the money?
Well, Tim, if we use the money, it's not there. Where is the money going to come from when Brian needs it to pay off the bond? Because he has to have the money. He has to have the money to be able to pay off the interest and principal on the $5 million. And that's why it's important for us to transfer it over to them in order to be able to have it, because it has to come out of our account. And that is our obligation with respect to how to satisfy the $5 million bonding that we're doing.
Oh, I understand that on an annual basis, Ken, but it sounds like we've stockpiled the money for future year payments, or at the point where he decides to pay it off. Like, why are we doing it? What's the advantage of that, I guess?
Well, I mean, I think what you're doing is you're allocating the 350 annually. If you didn't, then when we permanently borrowed it, you would then be trying to find 350,000 in the budget, right? At some point in the future. But the way that we're doing it is you're putting the 350 aside. And when we permanently borrow it, we're paying the band down. And then the remaining amount is permanently borrowed, at which point that 350 would still continue until it was paid off. Now, it would potentially, depending on the timing, you could shorten the life of it. You'll shorten the interest money. So the 350 may actually be able to come down from that number when we permanently borrow it. If you weren't putting it aside every year, then when I went to permanently borrow it in the next year, you'd have to have an interest and principal payment. And it would be on the full amount of 5 million versus using this to pay the band down when we permanently borrow it. In theory, we haven't done this because I think it's only been 1 year or 2 years of this. When those bands are due, I could pay down 700. I could pay down some of the band and just roll the difference, which, would, instead of keeping it on here, it kind of doesn't really matter which way we do it. I think the whole point of it was to set it aside so that it was available to pay the band down when we permanently borrowed it, so that you had it in your budget and you were planning for it. So it became part of it without having to go look for it in future years. Does that make sense, Tim?
It does, but it does the way you lay it out, Brian. But let's say we've been setting aside the 350 for 2 years. I think the first payment we made was in 2019. Mm-hmm. Hypothetically, isn't there 700,000 sitting somewhere that you haven't borrowed yet? So therefore, the past 2 years has been no payment. So why aren't we?
No, we've borrowed the money. Okay. So the bands will be due. I think they're due in June, to be honest with you. So in June, we've borrowed it in various tranches, but this last borrowing will actually, I think, completely exhausted borrowing authorization. So at that point, we'll have to make a decision what we want to do. And in June, we could pay down and permanently borrow. So there's 700,000 sitting there, but see, it's not actually sitting in an account. It's sitting still on the CPC's books, not on well, you're all part of the town, but it's on the CPC books, not on the general fund or anything. It's not transferred out of CPC control. It's on your books. It's just reserved for this expenditure.
If Mr. Chairman, just right there, let's say we have the 700, does that mean out of that 5 million, when you do borrow it, you only have to borrow 4.3 million?
We would only permanently borrow 4.3.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. So the more money we stockpile over the next several years, and when you do trigger the bond, that whatever we have in reserve, you only borrow what's left.
We only permanently borrow what would be remaining, correct?
And Brian, is it fair to say that at that particular point in time, when we take a look at what the borrowing was and what the cost of it is, it might be possible for the CPC then to have to change the $350,000 a year to a lower number, assuming that the cost of the bond would allow that in order to be able to have it be paid off properly?
I mean, there always is a possibility when we pay it down and borrow the remainder, that we could resize the issue and change the structure of the issue to benefit the CPC and reduce the potential cost. A lot of that does depend on the interest rate, but it certainly is something that could be done depending on what that amount is. So the issue could be resized when we do it and reduce the amortization and still only get to the 350,000 annually.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up.
Sure.
So in my mind, and Brian, tell me if I'm all wet on this. In my mind, the most important asset we have as a committee is our money. And the best thing we can do is put our money to work in all the various arenas that we have to make decisions on projects. And it seems like if we have an authorization from the town for 5 million, and I get Linda's point that we may only borrow 4.3, but I would just kind of throw out there for everyone to think about that. As a committee where our lifeblood is our money, that may be the wrong way to think about this. We may want to leverage as much borrowing power as we have, use that 700,000 that we haven't needed for the mortgage payment yet, and put that to work in paddle courts or historic restoration or other projects, as opposed to just letting it sit there. It's just another way to look at it. Unless, Brian, I've got this all wrong in my
No, I mean,
mind.
I don't necessarily think that it's not another way to leverage it, but I think that the theory has been that you wanted to have the money there when we actually permanently borrowed it to pay down as much of the debt as you could. Now, you certainly could do that, but at some point, and I always say it, I mean, at some point the bill is going to come due, right? I mean, I think we all will agree on that, whether I roll it for 10 years and it's 10 years from now. And then if you think about it, if you're not putting anything away to pay down some of it, then you're really looking at, you're paying short-term interest on it for 10 years and then you're another 12 years. So you're really the 5 million, you've paid some portion or some amount every year for 22 years versus a 12 years, right? Because if I roll it for 10 years, you would pay short-term interest every year on the bond that you'd have to set aside the money for. Okay. And then when you permanently borrow it, you're paying interest and principal for another 12 years. So
yeah,
in my mind, it would work better by putting it aside so that we pay it down and then we borrow the remainder and we try to resize the issue and make it smaller if we can to accommodate the 350 in the length of time.
And Tim, just to point out, this is the process that we worked with respect to the two bonds. And with respect to the two bonds, the cost of us was in fact significantly less than the amount of time that we originally thought we would have to continue the funding that we did, doing it in the way that we've done in the past.
Agree, Ken. I was just thinking about it from the standpoint of suddenly the demand on the CPC for just bond payments is going to double. So I was just trying to think about it in a different way to maximize.
I mean, we could certainly, we could also certainly, I haven't talked to Tucker or Ken or anyone about it, but we could certainly, if the CPC was to were inclined to recommend the article for a $5 million authorization, we could work with you certainly on the timing of when you start the 350 so that you would have some of that, the leverage that you're looking for, Tim, to utilize the dollars in the next couple of years, say, so to speak. I mean, so we could certainly work on the timing of when that 350 would be able to be done in terms of timing of the metrics of when we would be drawing this money down. So there is, I don't want to speak for anyone on the committee, but there's an opportunity for me certainly to work with you on how to structure that, if that's something that you wanted.
Are there any other questions with respect to the presentation as to?
I have a quick one. I have a quick one, Ken.
Yeah.
I'm not too comfortable playing Russian roulette with interest rates either, Tim. That's a game that, and they're rock bottom right now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only one way for them to go. And that makes me a little nervous to postpone those payments for a later date when we're already committing a bundle of money, and it might be a bigger bundle in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that Mark, that's the point that I have. The fact of the matter is, if we don't make these payments, and all of a sudden 3 years down the road, we're going to need to have $1 million. Where's $1 million going to come from? Because that's part of why we have tried to structure this way in a way over a period of time, so that it is not as painful as it would be if, in fact, we suddenly had to have 3 years payments all available all at once in a time when the funding from the state might not be as large as it looks as if it's going to be. So, but that's for a discussion for us when we make the allocations on the 12th and the 13th. Are there any other questions relative to the proposals
Yes.
and or any other questions relative to the projects that
Yes.
we're talking about?
I have a question.
Yes,
So do
Diane.
I.
Diane
have-
first.
All right, I'm sorry, but this type of finance is somewhat beyond my capabilities of comprehending. And I wondered when he keeps talking about a permanent loan or permanent bond borrowing of the $5 million, what does he mean permanent? Is something we're going to have continually? Is that size of a bond every 2 years or 3 years? Or is it just a technical description of it?
It's Diane, it's more of a technical description. So the way the town borrows is we don't permanently borrow. When I say permanently borrow, it's only for a specific time period, okay? It's for a period that is a period of anywhere between 1 to 20 years or 30 years was allowable. And then it's paid off. But we borrow in 2 phases. We do what's known as bond anticipation notes so that we can finance the projects and we can maintain cash flow. And then when the time is right, we permanently borrow the money. And then we begin paying on a 5, 10, 15-year schedule. And when we reach that payment schedule, it's retired and it's done. So the first $5 million is on an estimated 12-year schedule to get to the 350. So we would pay $350,000 for 12 years to pay that off.
But what
And then
do
it
we
would be
do
done.
if we borrow another $5 million that we're now looking
You would be
at
on another estimated 12-year schedule.
beyond the 12-year schedule, or would they be combined? So we'd be paying the 700, whatever.
We could certainly, quite frankly, there's a lot of options. We could certainly look at issuing the permanent debt at the same time and leveraging the borrowing power that we have. I can tell you that to Mark's point about interest rates, we just sold $20 million worth of general obligation bonds, permanent debt, and our total interest chart cost is just barely over 1%. So, money for us has never been cheaper than it's ever been right now, and it probably won't be as cheap.
They would go up on the interest rates, or the federal government was thinking of it. I don't know. I do know we're at the lowest thing. I just don't want to see we walking into disaster in 6 or 7 years. If they've gone up, who knows what they're going to do. And
that's my job, Diane, is to keep anybody from walking into that disaster. So, and I don't think we'll ever get into a situation like that. But to your point, we could certainly look at combining them and leveraging it to reduce the cost in a way that may be very beneficial. It's not something we've worked on yet, but it's something we can look at.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you very much for your information.
Neville, you had a question?
Yeah, listening to all of that, that's one side of it. The other side I'm going back to is the need for the money. The need for the money is so that we would have cash on hand in case a purchase comes up. Am I correct?
I'll let Tucker speak to that, but if you take a look at the chart, there are 3 items that are on the chart that have already been identified as targets for the particular funding that we're talking about. So
I understand that, but going forward, that's the reason for this loan.
Well, the fact is to have the money available for these kind of projects, but the chart that Tucker will speak to indicates that there are 3 projects, one of which, all of which have already been approved by the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and are then going forward for approval by the Board of Selectmen in terms of moving forward, assuming there's funding in place. But I shouldn't speak for Tucker.
Yeah, let me hear. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you, Neville. Yeah, so the uses for these funds are identified in the chart. So a couple of them are in conjunction with land acquisition, both for actually rental and home ownership. And the other is for in conjunction with subsidy for development at the Orange Street location.
So the ones that I have that stuck out to me was UMass property, 14 units, 6 Fairgrounds Road, 1370, 137 Orange Street, and a Wildflower Acceleration, 24 units. Are those, or is it something else? Or the others?
So those projects basically are projects which the monies that you appropriated in 2019 have already gone to support.
Okay, so like those properties, the other properties that you're mentioning are properties that could come up and you want to have the money on hand to get.
It's not just that they could come up, they're real.
Okay.
Yep.
So they are coming up and you want to have the money on hand.
Yep.
That's the bottom line of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the other.
Thank. If I can, I just was going to build a little bit on, I think, points that Mark to some degree made, and that John Trudell to some degree made. I mean, we were cognizant in our request for this support that you only have one bond outstanding presently, which is our own at 350,000, as we've been discussing, and that this would be, in round numbers, an additional 350,000 from your annual allocation. Our understanding is that roughly $2.5 million comes to the CPC through the combination of what comes back sort of, from the town and what the state may augment that with. So, we're cognizant that it's even approving what we're requesting, you still have significant funds that are in some respects uncommitted, other than the 10% requirement for each of the areas. And further, there is a true, time value of money. And we can all only imagine if we were going to purchase 135 and 137 Orange Street, which I think has broadly been recognized as a terrific location to do housing, given there arguably isn't a more walkable location, walkable living location on the island. We can all imagine if we were going to make that acquisition today, we would be paying 25, 30% or greater for that property. So what you are doing now is leveraging your capabilities to do so much more than if the money were sitting on the sidelines, which we appreciate greatly.
Are there any other comments or questions from anyone on the committee? And as I can't see all of you, just yell at me.
Ken,
John.
the chair, and I'm sorry, I know we're running a little over right now, but this is a big deal, and I think it's just with our housing crisis right now, this is absolutely critical. I know, because I am in real estate, it's very difficult to find something right now, and the longer we wait, more expensive is going to be. It's really a dilemma. And I guess on the other side, my fear is that when we average, and I'm just looking at past years, about $3 million, $2.9 million, $3.2 million, roughly, from what we're looking at, we have an incredible amount of need and amounts that have been requested this year. We're pretty much, in essence, dedicating, if that number remains the same, we're dedicating about 23% of the total budget of monies that we're going to be used for other projects. Already every year we're starting at our 77% to try and allocate funds and requests. So it's not that I don't believe in this. I really do. I'm just pointing out what Tim was also saying. We have a limited amount of funds, and we are our goal is to work with the money that we have. So if we're already dedicating the money, we're reducing our ability to look at other projects. So in essence, CPC becomes 23% financier to Affordable Housing Trust every year as we get out of the gate. And it's really just food for thought. And it is something that we need to do. And I understand 10% of all the funds every year have to go towards affordable housing. Affordable housing. But really what we're doing is kind of changing the bylaws, and we're in essence saying now 23% is going to be going towards Affordable Housing Trust if our average remains the same, about $3 million a year. Again, it's just really food for thought. Each member is going to think about that when we determine the awards. But it also limits us for future going forth with private positions that might help to the SHI list as well, and where they don't have the ability to necessarily get more public funds. The Affordable Housing Trust has different avenues to get more, funds aside from just the CPC. So if you can all follow that, it's more comment, food for thought, but thank you very much.
Are there any other comments before we close off the this particular hearing?
Brooke's got her hand up.
Brooke?
And
So,
Cuspa also has her hand up.
Pardon?
and
Cuspa also has her hand up.
Okay. Brooke, and then Ann?
I just want to say briefly that, first of all, I'm going to close the Affordable Housing Trust meeting just as a matter of procedure before I speak, because we're no longer a quorum. So, and then the other thing I want to say is I've been coming to the CPC on behalf of the Affordable Housing Trust for a number of years, funding cycles now. And I can remember back when the feedback we got was, why is the CPC the only funding source for affordable housing on Nantucket? Where is the community, and why hasn't the community stepped up? And I just want to say that the allocations you have given us helped us lay the groundwork to prove to the community that this effort is viable to achieve, accomplishable, and worth investing in. And the continued effort of this or investment from the CPC through this bonding helps us keep this train on the tracks in a way that keeps us in safe harbor, puts people in housing, and helps us accomplish a goal that's been on our minds for decades in the community. And I just want to say thank you for sticking with us for all these years, and to just say to you, we have worked very, very hard to build other revenue sources through annual town budget, working on the housing bank bill. And those things are growing. And but that doesn't mean we don't need you for all the stated reasons we've said in terms of this flexibility on land acquisition and your commitment, continued commitment to us. But we are working very hard on generating larger and broader funding sources to get this problem solved in a big way. But you're sticking with us, and sticking with us again this year is critical to that effort. And I cannot say that with any more emphasis than I hope you hear in my voice. And I appreciate all of your time and attention to the detail of this today. Thank you.
Ann Cuspa?
Yes, thank you. Ann Cuspa, Housing Nantucket. I want to speak in support of this application. I started at Housing Nantucket in 2007. And we've been doing this application process to the CPC since that time. So I have a bit of history, and the CPC has supported our office operations back then. And then over the years has supported mostly house moves. We made progress, and we still do, but I think that it's important to realize just the amount of lifting that the Affordable Housing Trust has been able to do. And also the safe harbor requirements of 24 units per year, it's a heavy lift. So we've made great strides in these years, especially in recent years. We've jumped from about 2% of our affordable housing inventory being eligible for the SHI list or on the SHI list to over 5%. And that was in only about 5 years. Whereas before the trust got involved, we were stuck there around 2% for a long time. And I'm not saying we weren't working hard at it, but now that we have all hands on deck, and this application is very important to continuing this important work, we're really making progress. So please help the momentum to continue to build and also support this application. So thank you.
Ken?
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, if I may just make one quick comment. I really appreciate all of your time, and I know this has gone long. But just again, picking up on something John said there, where you spend your money, I think says what your priorities are. And 23%, while it's a meaningful percentage of what you have to allocate annually, I think makes a statement. And not only is it important for the community, but relative to the discussions of the housing bank transfer fee up at the State House, which is gaining momentum, one of the things that may well end up being a requirement in order for a community to have that transfer fee mechanism eligible to them will be how much is your CPC already supporting housing? So this is a vital matter to what I think many people view as the #1 issue facing our community. And so again, we thank you for everything that you've done, and we hope for your continued support. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from anyone that I have missed? I do not see or hear anything, so I would like to thank Brian, who had to leave early, but Tucker and the presentation, and Brian Turbot taking the time necessary to help us understand how the process with respect to the bonding works. I think it was a very thoughtful, very careful, very detailed, and very clear presentation. So we thank you for the time and energy that you've put into the presentation. But more importantly, on behalf of the CPC, I want to thank you for the results that you have achieved and are in the process of achieving. Because part of what we need to do as a community is to create a greater level of education and understanding of the fact of how the town, together with the CPC, together with other entities, are working together to, in fact, address what is a really critical need if in fact, we really ever hope to continue to have a living, thriving, working community here on the island. So thank you all for everything. Thanks the committee for the amount of time and energy. And our next hearing is on October 5th. So I want to thank everybody and want to end up closing this meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Ken, do we need a motion to adjourn?
Please.
That's my motion.
Okay. Second, all those in favor, just yell aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Well, we have supposed to roll call.
Is there anybody opposed? As there's nobody opposed, so I heard an aye from everybody and not a nay from anybody. I will take that as a roll call vote. Thank you.
Thank you all.